Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Graeme Stroud. Graeme is a musician and writer, and has written on websites and blogs on a number of subjects, both musical and non-musical, for several years. He's also performed interviews and written feature articles, gig reviews and album reviews for the rock website Velvet Thunder. His first book, Status Quo, Song by Song, was published in 2017, and he's just released his new book, Thin Lizzy, one of my favourite bands, actually. I thought I'd get that in. Every album, every song. Hello and welcome to the show, Graeme.
Hello, Bob.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's great to have you on.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
That's good. Now, this is. I think this is slightly different, this one, because I'm interviewing somebody who usually does a lot of interviews, aren't I?
Absolutely, yes. I have done for the last 6-7 years. I've interviewed a lot of people.
Have you? Right. I'll better be on best behaviour and professional. So before we talk about your latest book about Thin Lizzy and your career, could you just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you became an author, please?
Yes, it was one of those things that happened accidentally, as so many of these things do. I wasn't a writer at all, other than the fact that I do have an enjoyment of the written word, as it were. I read a lot, and I'm the main procedure writer at work in my day job. But you mentioned that I'm a musician, and that's how it started, because I recorded an album of instrumental music under the name Chalk Hill Blue back in 2013.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd ever recorded an album of music, and in a kind of optimistic haze, I sent a few copies out to various magazines in the hope that they would review it. And the only people who did review it was the aforementioned Rock Society magazine. And in a kind of pathetic show of gratitude, I immediately friended them on Facebook. As it happens, they were going through a little bit of a kind of upheaval with the staff, I think. And their new features editor sent a broadcast out on Facebook literally a couple of weeks later saying, anybody fancy giving a go at writing for us? And it had never occurred to me to do anything of the kind. But he said, well, it's not going to pay your mortgage, but you get to speak to some pretty cool rock stars and you may get some free CDs out of it. So I'm thinking, wow, it would be rude not to.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah. So I replied to the appeal and had a bit of an email chat with the features editor. And he said, well, you're in luck. We've got Bernie Marsden coming up this month. How do you fancy it?
Wow.
I'm like, what? You guys don't know me. And you're letting me loose on Bernie Marsden? Yes, please. And that was in 2014, I think. And since then, I became an interviewer and a reviewer for Rock Society. And one of the guys that was involved with the magazine was involved also with a publisher who was putting out a set of song-by-song guides to various bands, and he asked me if I'd be interested in writing one. I'd never written a book before, but I said, well, I'll have a go at Status Quo. And he said, go for it. So I did, and that was how I became a published author, kind of just by blundering my way into it.
That's an interesting story. You start off writing an album, and you end up becoming a writer.
Exactly, yeah.
So you're obviously very creative.
That's very nice of you to say so. It would be presumptuous of me to say. Other than that, I do like making music and I do like writing. I enjoy these things, and that's why I do them.
And when you make your music, you mentioned that it was an album that you did yourself. So is that yourself playing every instrument?
That came about because I got hold of quite a nice electric piano.
Yeah.
That had a 16-track sequencer on it, which means you could overdub tracks. And so I wrote an album of keyboard music. It's not rock, not in any way that you would recognise. It's a bit proggy, a bit poppy, a bit this and a bit that, a bit folky and a bit everything. And it was only really when I downloaded the tracks from the piano that I even thought about putting guitar on it. So I put a few bits of guitar on. So yes, it's me playing every instrument, but almost every instrument was the keyboards. And I've done a second album since, which has a lot more guitar on and is a lot more kind of focused, if you like. But I've been playing the guitar since I was, 12, 13, and I'm in my 50s now. So me and the guitar go back a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I too play the guitar, and I've been playing. We're very similar ages, although I'm probably on the upper. I'm probably your age plus a bit of VAT on top. So yeah, I played the guitar since I was 13.
Right.
And I saw not my first band, but I think it was about the third band I ever saw were Thin Lizzy at the Winning Post in Twickenham in 1975. I know, it was fantastic. Anyway, enough about me. Back to you. So you wrote the book about Thin Lizzy. Well, sorry, no, you wrote the book about Status Quo first.
Yes.
I'm assuming that you were a bit of a Status Quo fan.
Oh, yes. That was actually probably my first big gig up at the Wembley Arena when I was 15.
Yeah.
Was Quo on the If You Can't Stand the Heat tour, I think it was. Yes, so that was my first choice because I thought probably I knew more about them than any other band. But my next choice after that was Thin Lizzy, and I didn't go straight into the second book because the first book took quite a lot out of me, really, and it took a lot of time to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until sometime later that the Thin Lizzy book came about.
Yeah. So you're obviously a big Lizzy fan.
Oh, yeah.
There have been a number of books over the years about Thin Lizzy. What makes this one different?
Well, it doesn't claim to be anything like a comprehensive biography of the band. It doesn't go into the backstory too deeply. It's a paperback, a couple of 100 pages long. It's not massive. But what it does attempt to do is to cover every song that they've recorded through official channels, every song. All the albums, of course, all the singles, all the B-sides. It does delve quite a lot into bootlegs and stuff as well. Again, it's not the first book to attempt that, but this one was to be part of a series called On Track, which is published by the Sonic Bond organisation. And they were missing a Thin Lizzy one, and I thought, well, that's my space. I want that one.
You're the guy, and it sounds like you've got a very fresh approach to looking at these tracks. I mean, there must be hundreds of tracks, or is it a couple of hundred? I don't know.
Well, I can't claim to have counted them. Actually, do you know what? I think I did count them. I can't remember what it came out to. But yes, in addition to the albums, there have been a lot of extra singles and such as well. Yeah.
And when you talk about each track, just for the idea of listeners, what do you tell people? Do you tell people about the history of how the track was written?
If I could find anything out about the history and the circumstances under which it was written, then I included it. Yeah. If there were any references in the song to anything outside of the band, like historical events or family members, because Phil Lynott was very keen on name-checking people, actually. Especially in the early stuff, a lot of his family members were mentioned by name in his songs. So I dug out as much information as I could about them. So if I could find any background or any information of that nature, then I would include it. In addition to that, there's generally a description of the song, what kind of vibe it has, if there's any interesting musical sections to it, because as a musician, that's kind of the thing that sticks out at you sometimes. And other than that, it's just my opinion. Go for it. I'll say what I think about the song.
And what are your favourite Thin Lizzy tracks? I mean, there's so much to choose from, isn't there? Because Thin Lizzy, they started off as a three-piece guitar-orientated trio, and then became a four-piece twin harmony guitar trio, etc. And then they ended up with this sort of, I guess, more slightly metal with a keyboard and quite heavy guitar, didn't they, towards the end, which is probably my least favourite part of them.
Yes.
I think I preferred them in probably about 74 till about 78.
Right. So, up to Alive and Dangerous.
Yeah. And possibly Black Rose afterwards, was it?
Yeah, sure. To me, the whole thing starts with Live and Dangerous. That's what it's all about to me. That's the album that got me into Lizzy in the first place. And it's not really typical of their output because it's much heavier, much more straight ahead, hard rock than any of the stuff that had gone before. So it was the live album that got me into it, and every track on there is a winner as far as I'm concerned. And then leading off from there, you hear the original versions of those songs, and then of course you pick up on other songs that weren't included in that set.
Yeah.
But basically anything that's on Live and Dangerous is fine by me.
It's a great double album, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
One of the and there's an old story. I don't know how true it is. An old story that although it was live and dangerous, there was some overdubbing done afterwards. How much truth is there in that?
Well, that is very difficult to get to the bottom of, actually, because Tony Visconti, who produced it, said that it was massively overdubbed. Brian Robertson, who played on it, said apart from the usual fixes and tweaks, there was no overdubbing. Brian Downey, the drummer, famously refused to do any additions, so the drumming is exactly as far as we know. How much truth there is in Visconti's claims that it's open to interpretation. I think it's pretty fairly established that Phil himself did some quite a lot of fixes, and there was some massive amounts of editing and interleaving of tracks. It sounds like one long gig. The way it's the tracks fade into each other and such like is just superb. But there's some fantastic stories of crowd noises being picked up from one track and dropped into another track. And one of the songs, Southbound, wasn't even played live. It was a soundtrack.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, this is, again, pretty fairly established that they recorded it at the soundtrack. Sorry, they did play it live, but they didn't use the version that they played live. They basically cut the band out, left the crowd there as much as they could, and dropped the soundtrack in on top of the crowd. But it's so well done, it's masterfully done.
You'd never know it.
No, you wouldn't know it. And in fact, I love the version of Southbound on that album. It sounds like the rest of the songs, the same sound, the same ambience in the room. It's brilliant.
It's a great sound. When you get those two guitars together, there's nothing like it, is there?
Absolutely.
So, in terms of the research that you did for the songs and the book, did you get to speak to any of the former members at all?
Yes, I did. I was fortunate enough to speak to Brian Downey, and that took me by surprise, just how willing he was to do it and how friendly he was about it.
Have you seen Brian Downey's Alive and Dangerous?
Oh, have I ever? Oh, yeah.
They're great, aren't they?
Absolutely brilliant.
I saw them a blues club in London about 2.5 years ago. I can't remember the name of the club. But
Nels Jazz and Blues, that would be.
That's it. Were you there as well?
Absolutely. Singing along down the front.
Yeah. What a great gig that was.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I honestly don't think I've ever enjoyed a gig more than that.
Oh, it took me back to the original days when they played small venues.
Yeah. Yeah, it would do. Because it's like a tribute band, but you've got a real Brian.
Well, it is. And I have to say, for me, that period of Thin Lizzy, for me, was the best.
Yeah.
Other people prefer different parts of it. But
sure.
But no, it was just like going to see Thin Lizzy, frankly. Took me back 30, 40 years, whatever it was.
Right.
So when did you first realise? Well, obviously you mentioned about wanting to be a writer, or you didn't intend to be a writer. You got sort of invited to become a writer. How have you found being a writer since then? Have you done other stuff as well? Have you thought about writing any fiction or anything?
No, I find that I don't really have the imagination for it. My forte is in collating facts and putting them down in logical order. And, I flatter myself that I'm actually quite good at that. As I say, I've in my day job, I do a lot of procedure writing and stuff where you have to take technical subjects and make them accessible
Yes.
for people. And I love the whole business about the research. And I have found interviewing people involved with music to be surprisingly trouble-free. You think there'd be egos there, that people would not want to speak to you. They've been doing interviews all day. They give you the brush off and be a bit huffy about things. And in all the people that I've spoken to, I've never had one occasion like that.
Well, that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
When you speak to the in quotes rock stars, do you actually go to see them in person, or is it done remotely?
It's almost always done remotely. There are sometimes occasions where you can do a face-to-face, but sometimes the travelling involved is just not worth it. I interviewed Robin Ford face-to-face. I've interviewed some people at festivals, Biff Byford from Saxon, members of Monster Truck, and various other bands. And it is great speaking to people face-to-face, but I kind of like being able to organise things and get things set out and sitting in my own chair and doing it on the phone. I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. So when you actually do the writing, when you do all the research,
mm-hmm.
and then you have to assemble it. In terms of the writing process, how do you do it? What's your approach? Do you do it every day? Do you have a certain number of words? How does it work, Graeme?
Are we talking about the journalism aspect here, or the book writing, or both?
Well, you can talk about both, yeah.
Well, as far as the journalism is concerned, I record the interview and then I have to transcribe it. And I transcribe it as accurately as I can before I even start chopping it and moving it around into logical order. And it's the transcribing that takes the time. That is a bit of a bind. I'm not quick enough of a typist to be able to do it, as they're speaking. I have to keep stopping and starting.
Technology can help you there, don't you?
I do know about technology, but I can't find any. Right. I can't find any that works. You can help me with that.
Well, after this interview, I will send you a link to something that I've used before.
Right.
It may or may not help you, but it certainly save you some time if it does.
Oh, that would be absolutely superb. It would be like a new lease of life. But anyway. Yeah, so then having got the conversation transcribed, it's a nice, interesting process to chop it in and out and bring it into a kind of logical format. And as far as the book is concerned, it's a pretty similar thing. I didn't have to transcribe anything apart from the Brian Downey interview. But, you get bits from all over the place. You get bits online, things people tell you, other sources, and make a lot of notes. And then it's a case of chopping it all together into something that looks reasonable. And it's an ongoing process as well, because you might do a pretty decent write-up on one particular song. But then over the course of the next couple of weeks, because you've got your mind in that particular place, you find out several other things, or you find out things that contradicted what you wrote down.
So you're editing it as you're going along?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a constant editing process all the way through, even till probably after I submitted it for publication. I'm still looking at bits and thinking, God, there's something else I could have put in there, but still.
And do you do this writing work every day?
No.
Because obviously you've got a day job.
Yeah, I have a day job and I have a family. I have responsibilities, and it has to fit around that. Much as I love it and important as I find it, I still have to treat it as a hobby, as something that I do for the love of it. So I do it whenever I can, and sometimes I go for a week and write, as much as I could, several days in a row. Sometimes I went for several weeks and never touched the keyboard at all, and that stressed me out a little bit, because the clock's always ticking, and you think, I'm never going to finish this. And there were several occasions when I thought, I can't see how I'm ever going to get to the end of it. But there it is. It's done.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading it, Graeme, I have to say.
Thanks. Good.
So have you got any current projects you're looking at the moment?
Not in terms of writing another book, no. I think, again, it's going to be...
You need a rest.
I need a rest from that, yeah. I do have some interviews lined up and some albums I'm reviewing at the moment. I've got an interview lined up with members of Fraternity, which is an Australian band, whose main claim to fame is that Bon Scott sang for them before he joined AC/DC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that would be an interesting conversation there. But that'll be an interview for the website, and a couple of albums I've been sent through the post, which I'm looking forward to listening and reviewing as well. So that'll all be up on velvetthunder.co.uk.
Well, what we'll do, Graeme, we'll put all those links within the show notes so that if listeners want to find out a bit more about what you do, they can do that.
Ideal.
That's excellent stuff. What would you like? One of the last questions I'd like to ask you is: it sounds like you've got quite an exciting hobby here. So, if anybody's listening who fancies doing something similar, what advice would you give them?
No hesitation, man. Just do it.
Just go for it.
Just go for it. I mean, what have you got to lose? If you write something and you're not happy with it, you don't submit it to anyone. If you start writing it and you find you haven't got the time or the interest, or it's not as easy as you thought, then you stop. But if you've got any thoughts about anything, any outline for a story, for a fiction story, an idea for a book, or any opinions or anything, and you want to write them down, what's stopping you? Just go for it.
That's great. That's wonderful advice there, Graeme. Thank you very much for that. And one last question. I did say that was the last one. One more last one. What on your writing career, what are you most proud of?
Oh, now that's a tricky one. And I honestly don't have an answer. I mean, I'm very proud of the books, I suppose. It has to be. Because of the sheer scale of the thing. When you interview someone, and I've interviewed some wonderful people, it's a 2-week project. You interview it, you transcribe it, you write it, you post it, it's done. But both books, I think, took me about a year each. Yeah. And just to have finished it and got it published, even if nobody reads it, it's out there, and I did it.
And you must get a sense of a purpose and achievement for that.
Yeah, and somebody in reviewing my Status Quo book said anyone could have written this. Any decent fan with a decent knowledge could have written this. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're dead right. Anyone could have written this. But so I did. Yeah. Some of them have. Most of them haven't. Yeah. And I did, and I'm really happy about that. And I'm happy that my family got behind it, and they were pleased for me to do it. It's great.
I have to say, it's been great having you on, Graeme.
Thanks, Bob. I've really enjoyed it.
We'll put all the notes that you mentioned earlier on, all the links, and also where people can find the book as well. So thanks ever so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graeme. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.